Me with my sister. I love it. I love it. How was it? There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people from my class. That's awesome. I know. Beeson probably does that. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know how to like fix it.
And have a seat. And by the way, at the end, some Beeson students publicly evaluate how you did.
Perfect. Gives a grade.
Yeah. Did I mention that?
One of my professors failed and he passed early, so then everyone can help with this. Very excited.
So yeah, it's gonna be great. It's just been a real relaxed process. So I'm going to go ahead and have a seat. I will say something briefly and then she'll introduce you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Carl.
Not literally.
Oh, they're on peanut gallery.
No, you don't seem also.
So let me look at the line.
Okay, yes, perfect. Okay, Riley, I'm sorry.
What?
No, you asked to send it to him.
My family asked
That's the only reason
You guys don't matter. Doug matters.
I'm like not even joking.
It's true though. It's true.
All right, get started. Hey everyone, so glad you're here. My name is David Parks. I'm the director of the Global Center. If you've never been to Global Voices before, then I'm so glad you're here. Now granted, I'm still glad if you have been, but I see we've got a lot of undergrad students. Raise your hand if you're an undergrad student. Fantastic. I'm just going to assume that has nothing to do with needing combo credit, all right? We do this event almost weekly, and I want you to know you're always welcome. I'd really love to have you. This is the last one this semester, so next semester, just remember you can just Google Beeson Divinity, Global Center events, and you'll be able to find us. And some of them throughout the semester we do offer combo credit. So I'm going to turn this over to Lisa to introduce our special guest.
All right, guys, thanks so much for letting me be here. David, I can't tell you how much, like, representing undergrads and even former Beeson student, how much a free lunch means to us. So thank you so much. But I am glad to be here. I graduated from Beeson, and part of my job since then has been able to work with college students. So there's hope for you guys as Beeson graduates to do something effective in ministry. So part of my job is doing Global Mission Scholars Program, and I have gotten to meet amazing students through that. Sarah and Maggie are two of those students. They're going to tell you a little bit more about themselves, where they're from, their majors, that kind of thing. But when students come into the Global Mission Scholars Program at Samford, they come saying, I want to do something long-term missions in my life, and I want to use my academic skills to use that as a vehicle to get there. So that's what Sarah and Maggie have done, and they come into the program saying that they want God to equip them so that they can go and share the gospel in the unique ways that He has skilled them and given them talents. And part of their program requirement is that they spend 8 weeks internationally in a context of missions so that they can get used to what it's like to be a little bit longer than most of us as high school students, where we spent a week or 2 weeks max internationally. That gives them that 8-week stint to spend. So Maggie and Sarah are some of our unique ones in that they chose to go together. And I love it. It's biblical, just smacks of biblical good theology. And so they chose to go together and do their internship process. And they're going to tell you a little bit more about this, but like how they even got involved in it, how they got engaged with the program that they went with. You can see God's design in that for them. And so I'm just proud of them. Thank you for letting them speak. Thanks for being here to listen to them and giving value to their experiences. I really appreciate your time, and enjoy your meal. Callie wanted me to let you know she's going to be at the back if you want to get a convo swipe on your way out. If your undergrad, then she can handle that for you. So thanks, ladies.
Hey guys, we feel really professional with our microphones, so this is fun. Like Fish said, my name is Sarah South. I'm a junior here at Samford University, and I'm studying communications with a minor in psychology, and I'm from Orlando, Florida.
Yes, and my name is Maggie Mulder. I don't know if this is working, but my name is Maggie Mulder. I am also a junior, a Christian Ministries and Spanish double major from Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Yes, so we thought to get started that we would tell you guys a little story about our first few minutes in the airport before we went to Ukraine. So, like we said, I'm from Orlando, she's from Denver. So we were flying to meet up with all the other interns in Chicago before we flew internationally. And so I don't know if any of you guys have traveled internationally in the past year since COVID, but if you have, you know that you have to have a 72-hour, prior to arriving in the country, negative COVID test. But me and Maggie heard that as 72 hours prior to traveling, leaving. So when we got to the airport, I got there first. I knew Maggie was driving to her airport, and I was checking in my bags and everything. My dad had already left, so he was gone. And this lady had to come and check my negative COVID test, and she looked at it and she was like, "Yeah, you can't go." And I was like, "What do you mean I can't go on the trip I've been preparing 9 months for?" She was like, "You need a negative test prior to arriving in the country." And then she just left. So I just walked to a corner and just stood there for a second. And I was like, I don't know what to do. So I called Maggie and I was like, "We can't go. I don't know what to do." And so Maggie starts freaking out, and then I hang up with her. And then I call the lady that was helping us with our flights and stuff, and she's like, "Okay, I'll call some people and figure something out." And I hang up with her, and I call my dad. I'm like, "I think you need to come back." And then he's like, "I'm on my way back." So I still am just standing there in this corner. I'm like, "Okay, I need to do something." So I go up to the lady, and I'm like, "Is there some COVID test site I can get tested at?" And she was like, "Oh yeah, there's one right there." And I was like, "Thank you for telling me this now." So I run over there. At this point, it's 10:30, and my flight is leaving at 11:10. And I'm like, "Do I have time to get a negative COVID test?" And the lady's like, "It takes about 30 minutes, so maybe." So I'm just sitting there waiting for my results. My leg is just shaking like this, and I see my dad in the corner with my bag. And I finally get the negative results, and we start sprinting. We run to check my bag in, and then I didn't even say bye to him. I just ran to security, and as soon as I got through security, I was like, this is when all of my preseason soccer conditioning sprinting comes into play, finally. And I'd sprint to my gate, and I felt like I was in a movie. There was people staring at me and looking so confused. But thankfully, I made it to my plane. And I get in the plane, and I text Maggie. I'm like, "Did you make it? Did you make it?" But before she could respond, my plane took off. So I had no idea if she made it or not. And this is when Maggie can tell you her side of the story.
Yes, so all of this was happening while I was still in the car on the way to the airport. And the problem with that was it was a Sunday morning, and so everywhere was closed. We couldn't just as easy as stop and get another COVID test because there weren't any places open to get COVID tests, especially PCR COVID tests, which usually take 2 to 3 days to get your results. And so I'm pulling into the airport, having no idea what to do, knowing that Sarah is frantically running around. I can't even get a hold of her at this point. And so I go up to check in my bag, and they tell me that very similarly I could get a COVID test in the middle of the airport. But that would mean I would have to go through security in order to get there. And so they print me off a boarding pass. Of course, they couldn't give me a normal boarding pass because I wasn't even officially checked in yet. So they gave me a boarding pass that says "cannot board" in big, bold caps. And I was like, just going through security with all of the TSA people looking at me like, "What did you do wrong? Why do you have a boarding pass that says "cannot board"? And so I made it through security and made it to the COVID test place, which didn't even open until 9:30, and my plane was closing and leaving at 10:30. And it takes 45 minutes to get a test. And so we had to wait in line, and I got a test, and by the time I got my test, it was 9:45. And so I had 45 minutes exactly, which is how long I had until my plane was leaving. And so I went to my gate while my results were pending, and I told the gate agent, I was like, "I am coming. Do not close these gates a second too early." And so I went back, got my negative test results, and then again started sprinting through the airport. And I really think it's funny because I feel like usually when you're in the airport and you see people running, you're like, oh, they probably stopped for coffee on the way to the airport. They are just silly them, you know, and that was me this time. And I had never experienced that before. And so I was running and I saw my gate lady and she started waving me, telling me to keep coming and keep coming. And I was the very last person on the plane that day, and we made it. But I just kept thinking while I was going, I was like, Sarah is on the way. No matter what, Sarah is getting to Ukraine today. And I was like, whether I'm going or not, I will have to travel across the world by myself tomorrow. So I was like, should I just cancel my trip and just not go at all? But we both made it, so it's all okay.
So we wanted to share that story because if any of you guys have traveled cross-culturally before, you know that during those trips, a lot of unexpected things happen, a lot of unexpected highs, and a lot of unexpected hard things. And we were so excited to share with you all of those things that happened to us while we were in Ukraine. So my cross-cultural experience in Lviv, Ukraine, was far beyond anything I could have ever anticipated. Through the people, the history and culture, the ministry there, and the team that works there, I got to witness change not only in the city of Lviv, but also in my own heart and character. Cross-cultural studies and missions is such a humbling learning experience that we are so blessed to have the chance to have gone on. I learned that entering into a new country where you've never been before requires you to know that you actually don't really know as much as you think you may know. Even if you've done a lot of research beforehand, there's such a difference in doing that than standing in the middle of a city surrounded by tons of people that you don't know, speaking a language that you have no idea how to speak. I think that to travel to another country, you have to have an open mind to the history and culture and the language, being willing to learn as much as you can with however much time you have there. And to be able to spread the good news of Jesus, you have to know what the religious context is so that you know how to approach evangelism. This is something that I only continued to learn as my time in Ukraine grew. And with the time that passed, I grew hungrier and hungrier for learning about information about Lviv and Ukraine. And as much as I believe I still have so much more to learn about Lviv, I can tell you some of the things that I did learn from being there. Ukraine is a post-Soviet country. They were fully controlled and dictated by Russia and the Soviet Union, and they suffered greatly from them until they earned their independence in 1991. During my time there, I had the privilege of interviewing several people, old and young, that had lived through a bunch of this stuff. One lady in particular, she was very old, but she had lived through World War II, the Soviet Union, starvation, living in ghettos, and all the things that come with that. She told me all about what that was like and how she experienced pain and death and just horrible things that you think only happen in history books. But what was so cool to me was how she was able to bring it back to how much joy she has now. Now that she's seen freedom and independence in Ukraine, you could just see the joy radiating on her face. And that was so cool to experience because just personally, I grew up in a free country, and I had never experienced any of those things. So to meet someone that actually went through them was so cool to be able to learn firsthand from her, not just from other things in the city. Like, I got to learn from someone who had been through it herself. And just like she said, she has so much pride in her country. This is just like all of the people in Ukraine. They all have so much pride in their country now that they're free, even though they still are going through so much persecution right now as they're currently at war with Russia, which I didn't know until I was there. They've been at war with Russia for 7 years. And I think a lot of people don't realize it, at least I didn't realize it, but there's a big tension between Ukraine and Russia, and Ukraine doesn't really like Russia, and Russia doesn't really like Ukraine. So it's very important to the Ukrainian people that we know this, that Ukraine is independent and it's free and it's separated from Russia. And despite all of the suffering and turmoil that these people went through, they still choose to fight for that freedom and light and joy. And their hope through persecution, even as they're still going through it now, has inspired me in my own life to have hope through suffering and darkness. And a lot of this hope that we got to see was through the ministry that's being done there. The team that's on mission there is through Mission to the World. They planted a church there called the Church of the Holy Trinity. It's a Presbyterian church that now has seen many Ukrainians come to Christ and become church members. Everything that this team does is focused on the gospel, who God is, and what he's called us to do. They surround themselves with each other, providing community and discipleship for each other, but also giving an outlet for the people in Ukraine to have community as well. And this is something that is kind of rare to them. I think something both me and Maggie experienced while we were there is we would hang out with a lot of the college students, and we would ask them questions like, what's your family life like? What are your parents like? how's university going, and ask them all those questions, and they would be stunned that we were asking them because they just don't open up about stuff like that at all. And they were like, that's a really deep question, but I was like, feels kind of like surface level to me, but that's just not something that they experience. They don't experience vulnerability and community. So it was really cool to watch how the Church of the Holy Trinity is bringing that there for them, that they can now experience a place that's safe and a place that they can be open about their feelings and know that they have people that they can trust. So that's something that we got to watch unfold while we were there. And they have a student ministry there, which is for university students that we were a part of a lot. They had a 1-week English camp that we got to go teach English at, which was really cool. And this English camp invited students from all over Lviv. So new students that had never been to the student ministry before came, and they got to learn English, but also while we were there, we taught stories of the Bible and did Bible readings and teachings. And something that I think was really interesting was the religious context there is Greek Catholic, and Greek Catholic is like a part of their life. They have to do it because that's what everyone does. And it's very traditional. They have to go to church. They have to say they're Greek Catholic, but rarely anyone there has a true relationship with Christ, and they've never even heard the stories in the Bible before. So during this English camp, we would separate into small groups. And I have this vivid memory in one of my groups. We had told the story of Jesus dying on the cross, and this boy named Oleg looked at me, and he was like, so you're telling me that all I have to do is believe in Jesus, that's it, and I have a spot in eternity? And I was like, yes, that's it. And he was like, no way, that's crazy. Like, he was truly blown away, which I think was so cool to see because I've been a Christian my whole life, and I've heard these stories my whole life, and they'd never heard the story of Adam and Eve. They never heard the story of the prodigal son, but they grew up going to church. But that's just how the church is. It's very traditional, and they don't experience this a lot. So that was something that was really cool to watch and be a part of. Another thing that I learned through the student ministry there is that no matter what country and culture you're in, you can make friends with anyone. And I think a lot of times we go in thinking like, oh, they're so different. I don't know how I'm going to get to know them. But a fun example of this is there's these two girls named Nastya and Olena, and I still text them like every day because we got so close. But before the camp, we were all meeting outside the church to leave to go to the camp, and we were all just getting to know each other, us and the other interns with all of the camp students. And somehow, when I was talking to these two girls, Harry Styles and One Direction got brought up, and we had this like immediate connection. We became best friends immediately. We stuck with each other through the whole trip. And just looking back on that, I realized that like we're both college students, and we both have exams, we both have tests, we both have good professors, we both have bad professors, and we can bond over those things. And we're both just young girls who can bond over a boy band. But that made me learn and realize that no matter what country you're in, you can make connections and you can make relationships, even despite the cultural differences that I've been talking about. Like, their history is so different than ours, but we can still become super close. So the way that their ministry is being done there is reaching so many people, and it was such a great reminder to me to witness God and how he exists everywhere and how his global church is everywhere. And he uses everyone and all different sorts of people to do that and to preach the gospel. So being a part of this church and their ministry in Lviv, Ukraine was a great reminder of God's truth to me, how he exists everywhere. So now Maggie's going to share a little bit about her experience with the culture and the history.
Yes, so like Fish said at the beginning, we are both a part of the Global Missions Scholarship Program here at Samford. And so we entered into this our freshman year and just dove right into this community, which ultimately built us up and prepared us to go on this internship, not only through finding the internship itself, through helping us support our trip financially and everything. And through this whole process, we actually started applying last November. So it really was a long process to be able to get there. And we decided we were going in January. But just because of COVID, we had no idea if we were actually going to go. If you would have asked Sarah at all of last semester what we were doing over the summer, she was like, oh, I'm going to Ukraine. I am doing this. This is happening. Versus I was a little bit more like, hopefully I'll end up across the world, but we'll see what happens. But it really was only by the Lord's faithfulness and provision that we were able to actually go to Ukraine. And if I'm being completely honest, I had no idea where Ukraine was on a map before I decided to go there, which maybe shows my lack of attention in my geography class in high school. But the only thing I knew about Ukraine was its correspondence or its connection with Russia from, history class in high school, and that was it. That was all that I knew. So I really went into this internship just wide-eyed, wanting to learn and wanting to experience as much as I could. And really, we both had so much to learn, and we both had no idea what we were getting ourselves into in the best way possible. But really, when we got there, we were there for just shy of 8 weeks. And we were 2 of 13 American interns and 2 Ukrainian interns. And so we were all living in Lviv, which is on the westernmost part of Ukraine. And it is a very westernized city. And so we were living in apartments by ourselves, which is a really interesting experience because we were able to really dive into what it looked like to live cross-culturally and live on our own and have to go to the grocery store not knowing a single word in Ukrainian and have to buy things on our own and everything like that. And be able to do that and be able to experience life with the students as much as we could. But we really had no idea what to expect. But what we found was that we were engaged in mentorship, in a disciple-making process, engaging in university ministry with students our own age who are students just like us, who also have tests and exams and live their life over just on the opposite side of the world. But what we found in Ukraine was a very interesting mix of culture. As in the beginning of in the 1800s, Ukraine was colonized by the Polish, and so especially in Lviv, which is on the westernmost side of Ukraine, it is a very interesting mix of all of that. So in the city center, which is where we mostly were, which you can see on these paintings here, the architecture was very much that of Western history. And so when you think of Western Europe and you think of the beautiful, colorful buildings and the intricate architecture, that's exactly what the city center was. And so it was a very, very cool place to be able to live for 2 months. But then we would go 10 minutes outside of the city center on a tram and see buildings that just looked completely destroyed. They were completely gray all across, flat, falling off bricks, and chains and bars over the windows. And that was the history of the former Soviet Union being in charge in the 1900s with that power struggle over Ukraine. And so it was so fascinating to be able to see both of the two in combination and just see how people just see that as normal and they didn't even recognize it, and be able to see the attitude of the Ukrainian students as they went through all of that. And so speaking on behalf of our experience in Ukraine, we realized that people were very drawn to us as Americans, very much so just because they had been learning English their whole life in school, but due to a very interesting relationship with education in Ukraine and the way that education can be very corrupt and have a very corrupt system, they didn't really get to practice English. So they would maybe learn it in a textbook, but they would never actually say the words out loud. So due to us walking in, and we realized once we got there that we were very recognizable as Americans, whether it was the way we walked or the way we talked, the way we carried ourselves. People automatically knew, even just looking at us, that we were Americans, which is something that we had to figure out how to utilize and how to act about as we walked into this different culture, because we didn't want to walk in being disruptive. We wanted to walk in with eyes open so that we could learn. And we realized that brought us a lot of opportunity, especially with the Ukrainian students. As they wanted to practice their English, we were able to practice English and gear those conversations towards the gospel. And they recognized us as Americans, and that was something that we were able to share with them in order to, and through that, be able to share our identity in Christ. And that was a very interesting experience also. And so Sarah kind of mentioned a little bit about this, but when we were over there, we did different interviews with a couple different kinds of Ukrainian people. And so we did interviews with elderly Ukrainians, we did interviews with university students, we did interviews with the young members of the church over there at the Church of the Holy Trinity, which is the church, like Sarah said, that the Presbyterian missionaries had planted there. But it was really interesting because for me, I did an interview with a young member of the church. He's about 30, I believe, and his name is Nazar. and he had become a member of the church when he was going to university. So he was about how old we are now, and he was going to university in Lviv. He's from a small village about 2 hours outside of Lviv, and that village had a great Greek Catholic presence. And so the only religion in the whole village was Greek Catholicism, and there were 2 Greek Catholic churches. And that's very much what he grew up in. But when he went to university in Lviv, he was seeking for more. He was seeking for this purpose that he had been lacking, and this lack of drive for life that he had growing up. And so he started trying out all of these different things and eventually found his way to the church in Lviv, which is very exciting, and to be able to see how he had grown in his faith since then. And what we learned from him is that he eventually started to build his own relationship with Jesus as he had never seen it before. And he went back to his Greek Catholic home, his grandmother's house in the village 2 hours away. And he wanted to tell her what he had learned because he was so excited. But she immediately said that he was a disgrace, and that he was a disgrace not only to his family, but to his entire village. And just that was something that was not okay. And he started to fight her on why what he believed was true. And he started to bring up scripture. He started to open his Bible, which was something that she had never done before. She was this devout woman to her faith, but she didn't even own a Bible. And so he started to argue this with her, and she just had no way to combat it, so she just pushed him out the door. And so it's so fascinating to be able to see the ways that even through losing his family, he was able to lean on the Lord through all of that and be able to just grow through his own relationship and build his own family through the Christians, the evangelical Christians in Lviv. And so that was just one experience that we had. But we also, like Sarah said, had many opportunities to be able to talk with elderly Ukrainians, which was very interesting because they have experienced so much in their lifetime. Like Sarah said, Ukraine became independent from the former Soviet Union, from the USSR in 1991. And so in a lot of the university students' lifetimes, they hadn't exactly experienced that, but they experienced a lot of the history from that and a lot of the scar over the whole country from that. But especially with the elderly Ukrainians, we saw and we learned so much, especially that atheism was the official doctrine of the USSR. And so basically, religion was illegal. If you were practicing any kind of religion, you were told that that wasn't okay, and you were told that you were incorrect, basically, and you were looked down upon. And so then we were able to see that, especially with these elderly, they were starting to gain this restoration of hope through religion, and we saw that as a great opportunity to be able to share where we find our hope in the Lord. And that was something that were able to see as such a widening of opportunity over in Ukraine, just as they are seeking and searching for so much more. And then we also, like I said, through all of that, had this awesome opportunity this summer as the Euro Cup was going on when we were over in Lviv, which was very exciting to be able to experience that in Europe. And this summer it was especially exciting because it was the farthest that Ukraine has ever made it in history. And so they made it into the top 8 in the Euro Cup, which was very exciting for them. They could not have been more proud. Like we said, especially in Lviv, which is a very patriotic city, they are very proud to be from Ukraine. The people in Lviv, they were so excited. And so we went to a park one night when they were playing a game, and there were probably over 1,000 people. And there was this giant screen, and we were all standing there, and we were learning Ukrainian chants on how to cheer on the team, and you just heard everybody screaming for Ukraine. And it was just insane to be able to see that and be able to see why people were so excited and see how they were so proud of their country as they were chanting. And through that, we were able to see the hope they had in their eyes for change, hope that had been struck away from them for so long and from their past, and hope in something that Ukraine is really starting to regain.
Yeah, so I think a lot about mission too is something that you don't think about a lot going into it. At least for me, I think mission is just how I'm going to affect other people, or God is going to use our trip to impact the people there. But what we both learned there is how much God really worked through both of us too in our own lives. Like we said, over a year ago, we decided that we wanted to go together. If you haven't picked up anything about me and Maggie yet, we don't like being alone, and we like having someone to talk to. So we decided to go together because we wanted to grow and learn together too. And I don't even think we realized just how much that would happen. If I'm being honest, before this trip, over the past couple of years, there was a lot of stuff at home that had happened in my life, and I had just kind of turned to feelings of numbness and apathy. I didn't really care about anything, especially God, and I didn't really, at the time, want to have anything to do with him. But I still went on this mission trip, and I didn't really expect anything to change. But like I said earlier, the team that's there is very serious about the gospel and how they bring community and discipleship. And although we were interns there and we were held to a certain standard, they still went out of their way to show how much they cared for us and wanted to mentor us and help us if we needed it. So like I said, I was struggling with these feelings, especially towards God, and I didn't expect to go through this internship with any change. I thought everything would stay the same. But I realized shortly into the trip that I would be forced to face these feelings just because of how God was already working in me. And once the lead pastor missionary was made aware of this, he cared enough to go out of his way to take the time to understand why I felt this way, and he wanted to take the steps to move forward in this. And that was something that meant a lot to me because it reminded me of God's faithfulness, and I already saw how he was working through that and how he used the lead pastor to help me with this. So through his help and the other interns around me, God graciously began to thaw that numbness and apathy slowly. Like I said, I didn't walk into this internship thinking anything would change. I truly thought I would just keep turning to numbness and apathy so that I didn't have to face any of the things that I was going through. But God worked through the team and the ministry and the country and the culture to bring me back to his truth. And something that I think he showed me, like a picture of the gospel through the country, was how they went through so much pain and they went through so much suffering, and now that they've come through it, they don't sit in it. They don't sit and look at their past and think about how awful it was. They look forward and they rejoice in what they've come out of, and they see that they see their independence, and they show how much joy that they have because they've come out of so much. And to me, that was a beautiful picture of the gospel, how we are dead in our sins, and on this earth, we'll go through so much pain and suffering, but God promises us new life and a life free of pain and free of suffering one day. And just seeing how the country did that exactly, they had pain and they now rejoice in their freedom, is exactly what we're supposed to do as Christians. We can see what we've come out of and what God has rescued us from. So it was just really cool to see how God used that and how he reminded us that no matter how long you're a Christian, he still will go out of his way to bring us back to him. We don't just become Christians and then he leaves us there. He sanctifies us day by day, and he renews us day by day. And no matter what it is that you're going through, he's there, and he's your father, and he cares for you. And that was something that I had forgotten just because I had been a Christian my whole life. So this was a great reminder to me that to preach the gospel, you have to believe it first for yourself, and it begins in your own heart and soul. And that's something that is really important. And you have the ability to preach the gospel to yourself every day. And I think that's something that I forget. Something else that God taught me was, although there is so much suffering and pain in the world, I think a lot of times I get focused on it, and I think, well, why is there so much suffering and pain, and why aren't you doing anything about it? That was something that I really wrestled with. And something that the lead pastor really helped me see was, if God is the God of the universe and I'm created in his image, how much more does God care about the suffering in the world than I do? Like, it's not possible for me to care more than he does. So that is something that I remind myself of daily now, because it just reminds me of God's greatness and how much he cares. Something else that I grew personally in was my call to missions. I have been, ever since my first mission trip when I was 11, I have felt called to missions. But I think it's hard to look in the future and see how do I tangibly go about that? And looking back, especially being on the internship, I got to see God's faithfulness in how he brought me to Samford, he brought me to the Global Missions Program, and how the Global Missions Program brought me to Ukraine. And it was all these steps that I could look back and see. If I, 3 years ago, had never applied to Samford, I never would have found this program. I never would have found Mission to the World. I never would have gone on the internship. And while I was there, God really showed me that I'm capable of moving to another country all by myself, that there are teams everywhere and there's mission everywhere. God doesn't just send people alone. He will bring people to be there with you. And I really learned that there's people everywhere. There's God's churches everywhere. And we are more than capable of going over there and being missionaries. So that was something that he really confirmed for me that he wanted for me to do, which was really cool to see how God uses mission not only for the people that he's reaching, but also for his people that already belong to him. And he uses that to grow us and to challenge us and to make us more like him every day. So that's how I grew personally. So now Maggie's going to share a little bit about how she grew personally from this trip.
Yes. So, like we said already before, we both came into college looking towards missions, and we weren't exactly sure what that looks like. At least I didn't know what that looks like. I grew up always being minded towards ministry. I had thought for a long time that ministry is what I wanted to do, what I wanted to work in. I just loved it so much and wanted to give that my life to that. But the only thing I knew about missionaries was that they, came to my church once a year and spoke, and that was the extent of it. I had never personally talked to missionaries. I had been on a 10-day missions trip in high school, and that was about it. And so this internship, I definitely saw it as kind of a stepping stone to be able to see what life in missions is like. And obviously, 8 weeks is not a lifetime, but is definitely a lot more than 10 days. And so I saw it as a way to be able to see before I would commit my life to 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 25 years in the missions field, to confirm that this is what the Lord was calling me to, and that he is equipping me and equipping us to go work in that and go do that. But like we had said, so we spent all of last year preparing to go. And it really just showed the Lord's sovereignty over it, that we actually ended up in Ukraine, even through barely making it through the airport. We just had no idea of what we were getting into. But we really learned so much about what cross-cultural ministry looks like as a whole and in my own life. And what I realized so much and what the Lord was teaching me this summer was that sometimes it's easy to evade life through busyness. We're able to get through each day, each week, each year by just checking things off a list. And I definitely was doing that. I know that I was looking towards life, and I was like, oh, I'll probably go to college, graduate, get married, start a family, and hopefully someday go overseas and share the gospel, And that's kind of, was realizing is the aspect and the view that I had on ministry before going this summer. But when we walked into a new country and a new language and just had the reins completely pulled, and I felt completely out of control in the best way possible. And just learning that the Lord has the control and being able to lean into that. Because if we weren't leaning into that, we had nothing. And so I just really felt that the Lord was calling us to different areas in that. And this summer, I definitely learned what it was like to take a step and take a dive into cross-cultural ministry. And what I learned this summer was that the ways that I and so many other people can so easily hide in our comfort. And like I said, was so eager to jump into something, but I had no idea what I was jumping into. And I wasn't sure if this summer was just going to be checking off a box or checking off something on a grocery list I'm going to college, I'm in GMS, I'm going on my internship. But my eyes were just completely opened in the ways that I learned about the urgency of the gospel, and that as Christians we're called every day to display our faith to those around us, whether that's in Ukraine or in Birmingham, Alabama, but what that looks like. And I learned so much about the confidence that the Lord can give us through his word. So we don't have to feel unequipped. I mean, look at Sarah and I. We are both 20-year-old juniors at Samford, and we are so excited to be able to tell you about our experience. But we are no more special than anybody else. We just happened to go to Ukraine this summer for 2 months, which we are so grateful for you guys listening and listening to us talk. And we are so excited and ready to share that with everybody around us. But I definitely just learned nothing if not the importance of leaning on the Lord's sovereignty and what that looks like. And so what I want to explain or say again and again is that the Lord is already working in Ukraine. He was working before we got there. He was working in us to bring us there, but he's still working now that we're not here. And so while Sarah and I wish more than anything we could just hop on a plane and go back to Lviv right now and go dive back into that ministry, we are very excited to be able to utilize that experience in order to see where the Lord is taking us in the future. And that we were able to step into the Lord's kingdom just for 2 months and not knowing what to expect, but gaining way more than we could have ever expected.
Lviv is a city that represents hope and change, new growth, light, and freedom. The people rejoice in this new life that they've been blessed with, understanding the oppression that they've recently fought out of. And the younger generations are proud and speak boldly of the love that they have for their wonderful country. And although there is still so much hurt that bleeds through today, many people are becoming Christians and are now becoming grounded in that hope. And the people that are becoming Christians there, the Ukrainians, are spreading this to other people as well. God is using the Church of the Holy Trinity, the team, and the Ukrainian Christians to slowly change Ukraine, and Lviv is becoming a beacon of God's hope. We will forever tell the stories of how God used us and used the team and uses the ministry there to spread the gospel. And we are so thankful for the city of Lviv, Ukraine, and can't wait to return. And we're so thankful for you guys for listening to us share our story about Ukraine. So thank you guys for listening. Any questions?
If you could repeat the questions so that we could hear it on the
Yes.
recording.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not okay.
It's okay if there's no. Allie.
What single relationship for both of y'all, like of the Ukrainians, like impacted you the most?
Yeah. So she asked what single relationship for both of us from one of the Ukrainians impacted us the most. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I would say one of the students that I met, her name was Sophia, and she is our age, or she was 21, so a year older than us when we went this summer. And it was so great to be able to dive into a relationship with her in order to learn more about the culture, because she was so willing to share anything and everything. And so she would hang out with us as a whole group all day long, and then I had the opportunity to hang out with her one-on-one a couple times also to learn more about her and about her family. And she's one who has been involved in the ministry, in the university ministry for the whole time she's been in university. So she was already plugged in when we got there, but it was really interesting to be able to see what it was like for her viewing life as a someone who has her own relationship with Christ, but that her family doesn't as much, and her boyfriend doesn't, and what that looks like. And so she was one of those ones that we had kind of touched on, where I was one day getting coffee with her, and I asked her, I was just wanting to get to know her and her family more, and I was like, so what's your relationship like with your parents? Just because I didn't really know what her family was like, and she was just like taken aback. She was like, what? And I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I am very eager to share anything about my family before anybody asks, which I know isn't for anybody, but it was just fascinating because she was so held off from that, and be able to learn from her on what the cultural differences were was very interesting and cool.
Yeah, she was awesome. We still talk to her, or we'll still text her.
Yeah.
For me, it was those two girls that I talked about. I just got super close with them, and it was just fun for me because it was like meeting new best friends, which I did not think would happen at all. Like I wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna make new friends when I go on this internship in Ukraine, but I literally was texting them before this. Like we text every day. They'll send me pictures of Harry Styles, and so it's yeah. But it was also really cool because they are Greek Catholic, so it was cool to be able to explain to them why I was there and why I went go to the church that I go to, and just get to have that deep relationship with other Ukrainian students. I just think that's why it impacted me the most, was because it wasn't okay, we met and then I leave. It's we got to know each other for 2 months and I left, and I'm hoping that I can go back and see them again and we still talk. So I think it just impacted me that I have friends in Ukraine and I can be there for them, and they can it's just a cool thing to have, I guess. So yeah. Yes.
Have you seen much evidence of problems with alcoholism and drugs and that kind of thing? Pain is supposed to be very bad, but it doesn't work.
Yeah. So he asked if there was any problems with alcohol and drugs in Ukraine. I think because we were with the college students so much, and I think they had an idea of what we were doing there. It wasn't awful for our experience, but it's definitely like they drink every night. They get drunk a lot, and that's just a part of their culture. So like we would go like out with them, but we would try and like set an example, I guess. But also try and like not be like come across as judgmental. So it was definitely like a balance of that, but
But it was really interesting because that was definitely like our bubble that we were engaged in. But even just as like we would go running every morning, and so we would go running at like 7 in the morning before we would have meetings or go do this or go do that, whatever we had planned for the day. And I remember like various times when I would be running at 7 in the morning, and there would be people drunk on the street from the night before, and people like yelling at us across the street, and you just keep running and you run faster. You know?
no, that's true. That's true.
So definitely more. It's like definitely more normalized,
Yeah.
especially because in Europe in general, that you can open carry alcohol. So you, like, even in parks everywhere, people just
Yeah, they would be like laying on the benches, like totally just blackout drunk. I forgot about that. So I guess I just blocked it out of my head.
blocking out those parts.
So yeah, I guess that answers the question. But yes.
You mentioned the Greek Catholic Church. Are there any other religious contexts that you have to be mindful of or that you learned about that were kind of the majority there?
Yeah. So he asked if we mentioned the Greek Catholic Church and if there was any other religions we need to be aware of. There was a small population of Roman Catholic. I think that comes from Western Europe. We also did encounter quite a few Muslims, but because it was so little, we didn't really talk about it much. I think the ministry is also very focused on Greek Catholic because it is so dominant. But we were taught about all the different, anything that we were possibly gonna come across. But it's so little that I think we didn't meet anyone that was Roman Catholic. We didn't meet anyone that was Muslim. Our ministry was really just focused on Greek Catholic.
Yeah, also it was very interesting the ways that we had to express our own faith, because there are certain words if you would say we're Baptist, Presbyterian, this, that, denominations, evangelical, they just automatically click and think cults. And so just because of ways that after they gained independence, the ways that missionaries have acted in the past and churches have acted in the past.
Yeah.
And so we had to be mindful of that as we entered.
Yeah, even at the English camp, one of the students who is now a Christian, he's been a Christian for a while, but he was helping us too, but he's Ukrainian. He said when he first went to English camp, that's where he became a Christian, or when he first heard the gospel, but the first day they talked about Adam and Eve and stuff, and he was like, this is a cult. Automatically he was like, cult. But now he's a Christian, and he's helping the ministry and stuff, so that's awesome. But, yeah.
One more question? Okay. What were, you might have mentioned this before, but what were some of the biggest questions or hesitations people had whenever you would talk to them about Christ?
Yeah. So he asked what were people's biggest hesitations when we talked to them about Christ.
I would say just confusion about what they believe and what we believe. Because a lot of people we would encounter, if they asked us if what our faith was, we'd be like, oh, we're Christians. And they'd be like, oh yeah, me too, which is exciting because we want them to express their own faith. But then they didn't really have any words to say after that. And so it's just how do you tell someone about Jesus and how you find your hope in that when they might know a few words, but they don't really want to be corrected. And especially in the culture over there, we would find if we were going somewhere and we were asking people for directions, even if they had no idea where the thing we were looking for was, they would tell us where to go because they just wanted to act as if they knew the answer. And so I feel that definitely was a barrier to ministry because people never want to assume that they are right about everything, which obviously a lot of us do too, but just what that looks like.
Yeah, and even I shared this story about Oleg where he was like, all you have to do is believe, that's it. It was an ongoing thing. I just remember it vividly because I was so stunned that he was so stunned. He was like, that's it, that's it. I was like, yes. And he was like, no. I was like, yes. And he literally was like, no. And I was like, yes. this is what like we believe is true, that we believe this is what the Bible says. And at the last day of camp, the pastors had like a gathering, which if students had questions, they could come ask. And I remember, I mean, they were all talking in Ukrainian, but someone to translate it. But someone like they would always ask like, or say like, I don't understand like how it's so simple. Like it didn't make sense how simple it was. Which that really, I feel like that was the biggest question, and that really stuck with me because I was like, my whole life I've heard this it is that simple. So I think that it was like, oh, I wish I could just help them understand. But that was definitely the biggest question that I encountered. So.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.